In the shadow of World War II, a small Nazi expedition enters the Romanian Carpathian Mountains in search of an ancient artifact buried in forgotten ruins. But what they find is not a relic. It's a nightmare older than mankind itself. Trapped in the snowbound wilderness, the soldiers soon realize they are not alone, and the mountain hungers. The letter arrived on thick parchment, stamped with the insignia of the Reich, the wax seal unbroken when it was delivered into Otto Weiss's gloved hand. The Hauptsturmführer read it alone in his quarters, Berlin's winter wind rattling against the shutters of the officers' barracks. Outside, soldiers shouted and boots pounded on cobblestones, the machinery of war grinding endlessly on. But inside the room, a different machinery stirred, a secret one, far older than tanks or artillery. The words were concise, clinical, almost sterile in their coldness. Proceed at once to the Carpathian region of Romania. Reports suggest remnants of great significance to the Airnäbe. You are authorized full command and resources to secure the site and extract any artifacts. Discretion is absolute. Berlin expects results. Weiss read the letter twice, savoring each syllable. His thin lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. This was his chance. For years he had worn the SS uniform not merely as a soldier, but as a seeker of knowledge. Before the war, before the black uniform and the skull insignia, he had been an archaeologist. He remembered the taste of desert sand in Egypt, the smell of crumbling scrolls in forgotten monasteries. Knowledge had always been his obsession, but now it was sharpened by ideology, by his belief that ancient powers could be bent to serve the Reich. And this assignment was no ordinary deployment. The Airnäbe, Himmler's pet project, had been sniffing after legends like a wolf on a scent, lost relics, pagan gods, whispers of blood rites. Weiss had angled for this opportunity for months, and now it was his. He poured himself a glass of schnapps and stared into the flame of the oil lamp. Somewhere in the Romanian mountains lay the answer to his ambition. He imagined unearthing a weapon older than Christianity itself, a secret force buried by fearful monks or primitive tribes. If he could bring it to Berlin, his name would be spoken beside Himmler's, perhaps even Hitler's. Otto Weiss, the man who woke the sleeping god. The thought made him shiver with a strange kind of pleasure. 2 days later, Weiss assembled his detachment in the yard of a snow-dusted garrison in northern Romania. They were not many, just a handful of men, but chosen carefully. A squad of hardened Wehrmacht soldiers to carry rifles and shovels, and one junior SS officer to keep discipline. Among them stood Karl Brenner, broad-shouldered and silent, his sergeant's stripes dull in the grey light. Brenner had seen too much war already: Poland, France, endless marches, and pointless bloodshed. He looked at Weiss the way a farm dog looks at its master, not out of loyalty, but out of duty. Beside him shuffled Emil Vogel, the youngest of the group, barely 19, his helmet too large for his head. He clutched his rifle awkwardly, eyes darting between the older men, eager for approval, terrified of making a mistake. His cheeks were still soft, untouched by the harshness of war, but the mountains would change that soon enough. Weiss addressed them with clipped precision. "Gentlemen, our orders come from Berlin itself. We march east into the Carpathians. There lies an abandoned monastery, older than memory. Local legends speak of a crypt, sealed for centuries. Our task is to uncover it and secure whatever lies within. You are to obey without hesitation. This mission is vital to the Reich." One of the men, a corporal with frostbitten lips, muttered under his breath, "A monastery? We came all this way for ruins." Weiss's eyes snapped to him, cold and sharp. "Not ruins. Power that has slumbered while Europe forgot its gods. We will remind it who commands this continent now." The men shifted uneasily. Weiss saw the doubt in their faces but ignored it. Doubt was irrelevant. History was written by men like him, not by grumblers with rifles. Brenner caught Emil glancing nervously toward the forested hills that loomed in the distance, black against the winter sky. He put a rough hand on the boy Sip's shoulder and muttered, "Don Sep, think. Just march. The mountains, Don Sep, care about your fear." But Emil could not help it. As the squad prepared their gear, he felt a gnawing unease, as though the trees beyond the garrison walls were listening, waiting. And somewhere high in the Carpathians, the snow began to fall heavier, drifting into valleys and cracks of stone where no human had set foot in centuries. The mountain slept, but not peacefully. The Reich was coming. The Opel Blitz coughed up a ribbon of exhaust as it ground along a mountain road barely wider than the truck itself. Chains clinked around the tires, biting into hard-packed snow. Pines pressed in on both sides, their boughs groaning under white weight, the forest a cathedral of black trunks and muffled silence. In the truck bed, the soldiers hunched inside their grey greatcoats, rifles between their knees, breath pluming like ghosts. Weiss rode up front with the driver, gloved finger tracing a pencil line across a creased map. The paper had been annotated in his precise hand, medieval boundary marks, an icon of a ruined cloister, several circles where he believed the crypt might be. In the dashboard light the ink looked bruised, as if the mountain itself had left fingerprints. They reached the last village at dusk. Smoke crawled from low chimneys. Dogs watched with yellow eyes and did not bark. The Opel eased to a halt near a well, and the men climbed down with stiff legs, boots crunching on frost. Old women in dark kerchiefs stood in a knot by the churchyard fence, their faces like dried apples. A priest in a threadbare cassock approached with his hands out, palms down, the universal sign for slow down, turn back. His breath fogged as he spoke, Romanian softly, urgently. Brenner stepped forward. Deutsch? Polnisch? Ruski? "Nu," the priest said, shaking his head. He pointed toward the mountains, then crossed himself twice, quick and fearful. "Men steer Vesci. Bless them. Nu Murgi." Emil, trying to be useful, fumbled a phrase book from his bread bag. He found a word and tried it. "Pericol? Danger?" The priest nodded sharply. "De pericol mer." He turned, scooped a pinch of dirt from the churchyard, and sprinkled it behind Brenner's boots. A charm, a warning, or both. Weiss stepped in with a brittle smile. "Malsumis," he said, one of the few words he bothered to learn. He flicked his eyes to Brenner. "Fuel, water, bread, 10 minutes." As the squad dispersed, Emil lingered by a rack of iron bells fastened to a post at the village boundary. Strips of cloth fluttered from the crossbar, white, grey, and one stained brown. A child watched him from a doorway, then shut the door. "What are those?" Emil asked. "Otar bells," Brenner said, appearing beside him. "Boundary. To keep the dead from wandering, so they say." His mouth twisted with something that might have been a smile. "Hear that, Vogel? Even the dead need fences." The wind breathed through the bells and produced no sound. They pushed on. The truck could go no farther after the second switchback, where drifts had consumed the road and the forest clawed it to ragged strips. Weiss ordered the men to split the crates, one with rations and kerosene, another with spades, pry bars, a short coil of blasting cord, and a black case from the Annenerbe sealed with wax. 2 men hoisted the MG-34 and its tripod. Another took the ammunition belt, brass links chattering. Canteens knocked against mess tins. Ice squeaked beneath hobnails. By moonrise, the village had sunk behind them. The line of soldiers moved through the trees like a slow needle, stitching a grey thread through the white cloth of the woods. Every sound seemed magnified, the creak of leather, the grunt of breath, the dull thud of snow falling from a bough. Somewhere far off a fox yipped, and then even that went quiet. "Sergeant," Emil whispered once, "do you hear that?" Brenner paused. Wind combed the trees. A soft hiss, a hush, the mountain speaking in a tongue of needles and ice. "I hear the forest," he said. "Keep moving." But Emil heard more, his name woven into the wind, syllables stretching thin. Emil. It was a fool's thing to imagine, and yet the sound slid under his helmet and lodged at the base of his skull. They reached a clearing near midnight, a scoop of land where the pines fell back and the sky leaned close. The snow was wrong here, sunken, crusted over as if something had pressed up from beneath and frozen mid-breath. A standing stone jutted from the drift, iron nails hammered into its face, twine bound around it in a pattern that meant nothing to the Germans and everything to the people who had placed it. Weiss stepped to it with his lamp. The flame guttered, resumed, guttered again. Dark marks scratched the rock. Letters. No, older than letters. He set his gloved palm on the stone, as if testing a door. Boundary, he murmured, and the word sounded like a challenge. They made camp at the clearing's edge, beneath a crescent moon like a chipped claw. Tents went up with the efficient misery of men who had done it too often. Brenner assigned watches, brewed coffee so strong it tasted like a nail in the tongue, and passed around a tin of ersatz sugar. The stove ticked as it warmed, smelled of singed wool and kerosene. Heat spread reluctantly, like a rumor. Emil lay on his greatcoat, helmet under his head, eyes on the tent roof. Snow slid with a shiver off the canvas. Somewhere outside, a bell should have rang. He waited for it and heard nothing. He closed his eyes, and in the warm dark behind his eyelids the trees swayed and leaned, and between them something tall lifted its head to smell the camp. Weiss sat alone by the standing stone, lamp cupped against the wind, the black case from the Ahnenerbe at his side. He drew out a small book of rubbings and matched symbols by lamplight, his breath steady, his eyes fever-bright. "Closer," he said to the dark, not realizing he had spoken. "We are close." On the first watch, the forest exhaled. Pines answered with a long, secretive susurrus. Emil, at the camp's edge, stiffened. The wind gathered itself and poured between the trunks like water, and this time there was no mistaking its message. The syllables came clean, braided in Romanian and something that wasn't Romanian at all. "Tit an papoi." Go back. He turned to call for Brenner, and the lamp at the standing stone blew out. The clearing fell into a deeper black, the kind of darkness that feels deliberate. In it, the snow under the standing stone heaved once, as if dreaming. The monastery revealed itself just before dawn, its outline jagged against the pale blue rise of the Carpathians. Cracked bell towers clawed skyward through the mist, their tops broken like rotted teeth. A high stone wall surrounded the complex, half swallowed by snowdrifts and creeping ivy. No birds circled above it. No footprints marred the path that led there. The forest thinned into a barren slope, and the soldiers advanced in silence, weighed down by both exhaustion and something more suffocating, dread. Weiss walked at the front, his map rolled tight in his hand, boots crunching on frost. His lamp had gone out during the night. He hadn't relit it. "Looks like God left this place a long time ago," Brenner muttered as he scanned the dead towers. They reached a rusted gate, sealed with a rotted beam. Weiss ordered it removed. Two men shouldered it off and let the gate swing open with a shriek that echoed like a scream through the mountains. Inside lay a wide stone courtyard, choked with drifted snow and the remains of shattered statues. A headless saint lay face down near the entrance. Emil paused beside it, frowning. "It sets warm," he said, running a glove over the stone, like body heat. Brenner touched it. It was warm, not hot, but wrong, as if the stone had not forgotten the shape of flesh. "Move," I snapped, already ascending the steps into the abbey proper. Inside, the air was dry and thick with dust that had no scent. The main nave stood hollow and still, columns bowing inward like mourners. Motes of dust drifted in the shafts of pale morning light, but they moved too slowly, as if underwater. A broken crucifix leaned on the altar, but it was not Christ that had been nailed there. The figure on the cross was unfamiliar, twisted, many-limbed, its face a void of gouged stone. One of the men crossed himself, murmuring, "Mein Gott." Weiss's voice cracked like a whip. "Photograph this, all of it." They fanned out through the structure. The monastery's stone walls were covered in faded frescoes, red pigment, black symbols, runes that pulsed in torchlight. Some depicted saints, others monstrous shapes being exorcised or worshipped. It was unclear which. In a side chamber, Brenner found shelves of moldering books and scrolls, eaten by mice and rot, but one volume had survived, thick leather, bound with iron clasps. He opened it and winced at the smell of old blood that rose from the pages. The Latin was legible enough, Liber Demonum Transmontanus, the Book of Mountain Demons. He brought it to Weiss, who took it with trembling hands. "This is it," Weiss said reverently. "This monastery was not built for worship. It was built to imprison." Brenner glanced around at the cracked walls, the collapsed ceiling. The way the wind didn't seem to enter this place even though the door was open. Then they failed. Deep beneath the stone floor, a hollow sound echoed. A knock, like something tapping from below. That night, they made camp inside the monastery. Weiss forbid anyone from sleeping outside the walls, claiming the structure was consecrated. No one argued. Emil sat near the makeshift stove, chewing hard bread with trembling hands. "It sits in the walls," he said to no one. "This place breathes." Brenner overheard him and passed him a tin of coffee. "Drink, don't sit think." But he knew what Emil meant. There was a rhythm to the monastery, barely audible, like wind trapped in stone or bones shifting just below the surface. He felt it in his boots, in his bones. Later, while on watch, Brenner wandered into what remained of the cloister garden, a sunken courtyard where pale weeds pushed through frozen mud. There, buried beneath creeping vines and snow, he found a metal plate set into the ground. He brushed it clean. It was a hatch. No hinges, no keyhole, just iron bolted to stone, etched with symbols identical to those in the book, circles within circles, teeth, spirals like drills boring into the earth. He called Weiss. The SS officer knelt, eyes gleaming. "This is it, the crypt." He looked up at the ruins with something like awe. "They built the whole monastery as a lid." Brenner rose slowly. "Why seal it this deep?" Weiss gave him a strange smile, because they were afraid of what was beneath the grave. The wind howled through the broken bell tower, then louder than it should have been. The bells didn't ring, but a sound vibrated through the walls nonetheless, deep and pulsing like a heartbeat through stone. Something below them heard it, and answered with a knock. 3 slow taps, from the other side of the hatch. It took them half a day to clear the garden and uncover the crypt's full outline, an octagonal iron hatch, the width of a tank, bolted shut with 8 rusted clasps. Each bore a different symbol, a cross with inverted arms, an eye pierced by a nail, a serpent eating its own tail. They were not religious in the Christian sense. They were older. "Seal of containment," Weiss muttered, running gloved fingers along the etchings. "Protective magic." The monks didn't want something to get in. They wanted to make sure nothing ever got out. One of the soldiers, a thick-necked corporal named Ansel, spat. "Magic symbols or not, this is still just metal. We can open it." Brenner turned sharply. "Should we?" Weiss stood and unrolled a blueprint drawn in his notebook. "There are legends from this region, stories of something buried beneath the mountain. Not a god, not a demon, something before either. An intelligence that predated man, imprisoned in the earth during the days of Rome, or earlier." He tapped the drawing. "This hatch is not a lock. It's a prison door." "And you want to open it?" Brenner said, voice low. Weisstip's eyes sparkled in the cold light. "For the Reich to last 1,000 years, we must claim power 1,000 years old. Older, if need be." At dusk, Weiss gave the order. The soldiers set up torches and lamps around the courtyard. The wind had died. The cold felt thick, motionless, suffocating. Each breath hung in the air too long. The MG-34 was mounted nearby, aimed unconsciously at the hatch. No one had said to do it. Ansel and 2 others took pry bars and hammers to the clasps. They groaned but didn't set break. Weiss handed them a sealed envelope, orders from Berlin authorizing use of demolition methods if sacred containment proves structurally insurmountable. "What the hell does sacred containment mean?" Brenner muttered. It didn't matter. A small charge was placed beneath the central ring. The men stood back. The fuse was lit. The explosion echoed like thunder in a canyon, followed by silence. The smoke cleared, and the hatch was ajar, not fully open, just enough to reveal a seam of darkness beneath. The air that rushed out was wrong. Not cold, not warm. It had weight, a pressure that made the men stagger back as if slapped. Emil dropped to his knees, gagging. It smells like burnt bone and roses. Brenner smelled it too, sweet rot like something long dead given perfume. His vision swam. Then came the sound. From beneath the loosened hatch, something moved. Not footsteps, not breath, more like scraping, like claws dragged along ancient stone. No rhythm, no pace, just movement and the suggestion that it wasn't alone. Weiss stepped forward. Lanterns, open it fully. The soldiers hesitated. Now Weiss barked, the steel in his voice slicing through their fear. With shaking hands, the men returned to the bolts. One by one, they forced the clasps free. With a groan like a wounded animal, the hatch slid open. Below lay a spiral staircase carved into black stone, slick with something that wasn't water. The steps curved down into total darkness. Brenner stared into it. His breath quickened. "There sits, writing," he said, pointing at the top stair. Latin, crudely carved. "Qui scindit signum." He translated aloud, voice barely above a whisper. "He who breaks the seal invites what sleeps." "I go first," Weiss said. He descended with a torch. The flame guttered but held. Brenner followed, rifle ready. Behind him came Ansel, then Emil, white-faced and silent. The descent was slow. The temperature dropped with every step. The torchlight revealed carvings along the wall, faces screaming, hands bound in chains, animals disemboweled, shapes that defied human anatomy. Some moved when you weren't looking. The stairs ended in a chamber that was perfectly round. The walls glistened with damp. At the center stood a stone plinth, its top split like an open wound. Chains bolted it to the floor, coiled like serpents. They were broken. Beside the plinth lay bones, dozens, some human, some not. The chains had been torn from within. No one spoke. Then Emil whispered, "Do you hear that?" They did, a low thrum, like a heartbeat buried under rock. It came from the walls, the floor, the air itself, and layered over it, faint and feminine. A voice, whispering, not in German, not in Latin, not in any language they knew, but they understood. It was thanking them. Weiss stepped forward. His pupils were dilated, breath shallow. He touched the plinth. The voice stopped, and the temperature in the room rose. Not like warmth, like fever, like infection, like breath on the back of your neck in a locked room. Behind them, the stairs closed. A grinding of stone, a shifting of air. They were no longer alone in the dark. They didn't sleep that night. Not truly. Some lay in their tents and closed their eyes, but rest never came, only a heavy, pulsing stillness that pressed against their ribs like a second heartbeat. Others sat in silence, staring into dying flames, ears twitching at sounds they couldn't name. The crypt had been sealed again. Weiss ordered it covered with canvas and snow-packed tarps, but the damage had been done. Whatever had slumbered below was no longer dreaming. It was listening, and whispering. The first to hear it clearly was Emil. He sat alone during third watch, rifle across his knees, lamp hissing beside him. The wind had died entirely. The night was too still. The trees didn't move. And then he heard it. A voice, soft, coaxing. "Emil." It was unmistakable. He stood quickly, knocking the lamp. "Who's there?" he called into the dark. The light guttered. No response. But the voice returned. "You stir not like them. You don't that belong to him." He turned in circles, heart hammering, rifle raised. The shadows between the trees looked thicker now, like figures watching from behind bark. He stumbled toward the courtyard, trying to wake someone, anyone, and stopped. There, standing beside the open crypt hatch, was a woman. Her back was to him, her long black hair unmoving in the breeze that wasn't there. Her dress was tattered robes, monastic, maybe, or something older. Her hands were folded in front of her, still, reverent. "Who are you?" Emil whispered. The woman turned. She had no face. Only a blank stretch of skin, stitched where eyes and mouth should be. She opened her mouth, anyway, and screamed, a sound not heard but felt. It passed through him like a wave of fire and teeth. He blacked out. They found him at dawn, collapsed beside the crypt with frozen tears streaking his cheeks. His pulse was frantic, but his lips moved constantly, repeating a word that meant nothing to them. Zuragal, Zuragal, Zuragal. Weiss stood over him, jaw clenched. Take him to the inner cloister. Restrain him. He may have made contact. Contact. Brenner snapped. He sets raving. That doesn't mean he's wrong, Weiss said quietly. Inside the cloister, the others began to fray. Ansel the corporal claimed he saw lights moving through the forest during his watch, blue flames hovering between the trees. When Brenner investigated, there were only pines and untouched snow. Another soldier, Kruger, swore he heard chanting from beneath the courtyard. Said it was in his mother's voice. She'd died in Dresden the year before. That night, Kruger carved strange spirals into his chest with a mess knife. He died before anyone noticed. His last words were, "It sees me." Weiss was undeterred. "This is proof," he said, scribbling furiously in his notebook by the fire. "It starts communicating. Whatever lives or waits beneath us, it sets intelligent. It reacts to stimuli. It sets sentient." Brenner stared at him. "It sits killing us." Weiss didn't even look up. Discovery always comes at a cost. The fire snapped. For a moment, Brenner thought he saw Weiss's shadow stretch the wrong way, up the wall, not across the floor. A trick of the light, maybe. But that night, Brenner started hearing it too. Not voices. Not yet. Just scratching. From inside the walls of the monastery. He pressed his ear to the cold stone, heard nothing, then just faintly, a dragging sound, like claws on the underside of reality. He didn't tell anyone. In the inner cloister, Emil screamed himself hoarse. He no longer responded to his name. When asked what he saw, he said only, "She sits inside now, behind my eyes." When the chaplain tried to calm him with a prayer, Emil retched black bile and bit the man's finger to the bone. Weiss watched through the door, lips pursed. "She sits choosing him," he whispered. Brenner overheard. "Who is Venesis?" Weiss finally looked at him, and for the first time, there was uncertainty in the Hauptsturmführer's eyes. "I don't know," he admitted, "but she sits older than the church, older than Rome. They built this place to bury her, not just her body, her name, that sips why she sits reaching out, to be remembered." Brenner turned away, disgusted. "This is madness." Weiss smiled, not cruelly, but with the awe of a man at a cathedral sips altar. "No, this is faith." That night, the whispers grew louder. The soldiers tossed in their sleep. Some bled from their ears. One began speaking in a language no one could identify even in dreams. And under the monastery, something waited, its hunger growing. The first man vanished during a routine watch. His name was Schneider, quiet, dependable, a Bavarian with a square jaw and steady hands. He'd volunteered for the midnight perimeter, rifle slung over his shoulder, wool coat buttoned tight. It was snowing lightly. Visibility was poor. He never returned. They found his lantern first, still lit, its glass frosted over, the flame flickering weakly inside. A circle of footprints surrounded it, his own pacing back and forth in the snow. And then, nothing. The prints simply stopped. No struggle, no blood, no drag marks, as if he'd evaporated. "Wolves?" one soldier asked hopefully. Brenner shook his head. "Wolves don't carry off grown men without leaving a trace." Weiss ordered a full search. The soldiers fanned out in pairs, rifles ready, boots crunching through knee-deep snow. The pine forest loomed in total silence, as if watching them. The branches held their breath. Brenner found the body. Not far from the monastery, in a clearing hemmed by black trees, Schneider lay on his back. His arms were outstretched, his eyes frozen open in terror. His entire torso had been torn open, not sliced, unzipped. as if some immense claw had ripped him from collarbone to groin. And inside, nothing. No organs, no spine, not even blood. Just emptiness. A hollow man, scooped clean. No footprints led to or from the scene. They carried him back wrapped in canvas, but the mood in the camp fractured. Jokes stopped. Cigarettes went unlit. Every creak of snow or distant snap of a branch sent hands to triggers. Emil refused to look at the body. He stared at the sky, lips moving constantly in prayer or madness. "She sips hungry now," he whispered. "She tasted us." Weiss didn't deny it. "I believe Schneider was chosen," he told the men that evening. "Sacrificed, perhaps. A gesture. Proof that she is awake." "That wasn't sacrifice," Brenner growled. "That was a message." Weiss met his gaze. "Exactly." The next night, 2 more men tried to desert. Ansel and another trooper, Weber, gathered packs and slipped out after mess. They didn't make it far. The guards caught them at the tree line, panicked, breathless, half-crazed. "What did you see out there?" Brenner asked Weber as he shoved him back toward the main gate. Weber shook his head. "Nothing. That sip's the worst part. There sips nothing out there. The forest, it moves. You think you're walking straight, and the path circles back. We found our own footprints coming toward us." Brenner locked eyes with Weiss. "The mountain doesn't want us to leave." Weiss didn't deny that either. That night, snow fell harder, thick, choking flakes. The tents groaned under the weight. Ice crept along the weapons, jamming bolts and frosting barrels. The monastery groaned audibly, like old wood, shifting. But it was stone. Brenner couldn't sleep. He stepped outside, breathing steam, scanning the courtyard. The crypt hatch was sealed, but his gaze returned to it again and again. And that sips when he saw something move. A figure, walking across the far edge of the snow. Tall, pale, naked. Its limbs were too long, arms dragging past its knees. Its head tilted unnaturally. No features, no eyes, but it was staring at him. He raised his rifle. "Halt!" he barked. "Hände hoch!" The thing paused. Then it walked into the stone wall of the monastery and vanished like smoke. The next morning, Weber was gone. No footprints again, just a scream in the night and an empty bedroll. Only one thing remained, his tongue frozen stiff, placed neatly on the center of his blanket, not ripped, surgically removed. Brenner didn't speak for the rest of the morning. Weiss, still feverish with purpose, summoned everyone for a briefing. "We're too close," he said. "Whatever lies beneath this mountain, she wants us here. The deaths are not punishments. They set her invitation. We're still being tested. And soon, we still be worthy." "Worthy of what?" Brenner asked. Weiss smiled, of knowing. That evening the cook fire wouldn't light. The fuel refused to catch flame. The air had changed, too thick, too wet. Some men vomited uncontrollably. Others stood and stared at the horizon as if something enormous approached, unseen. Emil didn't eat. He sat in the snow and wept openly. "She wants us hollow," he whispered. "Just like Schneider, just like the monks. She wants to wear us." Brenner watched from a distance. And finally he allowed himself to say what had been growing in his gut since they opened the hatch. "We never should have come here." But it was too late now. The mountain was awake, and it was feeding. The silence broke on the 5th night. Not with whispers, not with screams, with chewing. It was Ansel. They found him crouched by the fire pit just before dawn, his face and hands soaked in something red and thick. His fingers moved fast, animal-like, stuffing hunks of raw meat into his mouth. The meat had been stripped from a corpse beside him. Kruger's remains dug from the shallow grave they'd made 2 days prior. Brenner shouted, raised his rifle. Emil fell to his knees and vomited. Ansel didn't look up. He chewed, smiling. His gums bled. His eyes were milky. "He told me," Ansel said, mouth full. "He said if I ate, I could stay. If I fed the hunger, I said be left alone." Brenner grabbed him. shoved him into the snow. "Who told you?" Ansel giggled. "The mountain." They restrained him with rope and stored what was left of Kruger's body in a storage shed. Weiss refused to let anyone execute Ansel. "He sips under influence. A vessel. This is evidence that the entity is choosing hosts." Brenner grabbed Weiss by the collar, slammed him against the monastery wall. "That sip's not a host. That sip's a ghoul. You think the Reichs can use this thing? You can control hunger like that?" Weiss didn't fight back. His eyes gleamed. "We must understand it first." "You, sir, are already infected," Brenner snarled. "Perhaps," Weiss whispered. That night Emil came to Brenner's tent, face pale as the snow outside. "I can hear my thoughts anymore," he said. "There's someone else in my head. She walks through my memories like a church aisle, changes things, whispers to me about fire and teeth and the color of skin from the inside." Brenner stared. "You need sleep." "I don't sleep anymore," Emil said. "I just close my eyes and wait." Brenner wanted to comfort him but couldn't. He was starting to feel it too. His dreams turned to tunnels. His hands itched for the rifle even when there was no danger. The mountain had sunk into him. The hunger wasn't just flesh, it was existential. A bottomless need not to consume, but to erase. The next morning, they found the chapel desecrated. The inverted crucifix was missing. On the altar, something had been drawn in blood. A spiral of teeth surrounding a black circle. Bones from the ossuary had been laid in a ring around it, arranged like fingers pointing inward. In the center, carved into the stone with a bayonet, Zuragal. That same word Emil had been muttering, now engraved in reality. When confronted, Emil didn't deny it. "She told me her name," he said. "Now she still know mine." Weiss was becoming more unhinged by the hour. He'd stopped eating. His uniform hung from his frame like loose drapery. He carried the Book of Mountain Demons with him constantly, whispering to it, sometimes answering it aloud. When Brenner confronted him again, Weiss was pacing the crypt garden, barefoot in the snow. "Do you know what this place really is?" Weiss said, voice trembling with excitement. "It said's not a prison. It said's a womb. The monks tried to abort it. They failed." Brenner raised his rifle. "We stir burning this place to the ground." Weiss looked up, smiled. "She won't let you." That night, something killed the sentry. They heard no scream, only found the corpse hanging from the rafters of the inner cloister, his legs missing, arms bent backward at impossible angles, a look of rapture on his face. Written in blood across his chest. "The flesh forgets, but the soul remembers." The camp began to implode. Men fought over rations they no longer wanted. One drank lamp oil. Another tried to walk barefoot into the blizzard and vanished into white. Brenner knew it now, not suspected, knew. They weren't alone. Not just haunted, not just cursed. They were inside something, living, breathing. The mountain wasn't a location, it was an organism, and they had triggered its immune response. It was digesting them. That evening Ansel chewed through his restraints. By the time they found him, he'd bitten Emil's throat out and smeared symbols on the walls with the boy's blood. When they shot him, he didn't scream. He laughed. The bullet didn't stop the smile. That night, Brenner sat by the dying fire, rifle across his lap, eyes hollow. "There rests no mission anymore," he whispered. "No command, no Reich. Just teeth in the dark and the things they chew." He looked around. Only 4 men remained. 4, and Weiss. And she was still waiting. The crypt hatch opened again at midnight. No orders were given. No strategy discussed. Weiss simply stood, eyes glassy, and walked toward it with the Book of Mountain Demons in his hand. The remaining soldiers, 3, not counting Brenner, followed without speaking. No one carried lamps. No one needed them. The dark was part of them now. Brenner hesitated at the threshold, hand gripping his rifle tight enough to tremble. A sound like breathing issued from the stairwell, deep and wet, like something sleeping just below water. Weiss looked back at him once. You don't just have to come, Sergeant. Brenner nodded. I know. And stepped into the dark. They descended without torches. The air grew thicker the deeper they went, like sinking into blood-warm syrup. The spiral staircase no longer seemed man-made. Its walls curved unnaturally, rippling with veins of black quartz that pulsed softly. One man whispered something behind Brenner. It didn't sound German. It didn't sound human. After 60 steps, the stairwell opened into a vast subterranean hall. No architecture remained. No columns. No masonry. Only organic stone, walls that pulsed with a heartbeat, surfaces slick with something that wasn't moisture. The smell of rotting flowers choked the air. The stone beneath their boots felt spongy. At the center of the chamber rose a massive altar, obsidian, fused with bone, twisted into unnatural angles that defied geometry. Above it hovered a shape, not floating, suspended, as if pinned between dimensions. It had no clear form, only a suggestion, limbs folded inward, wings of skin without feathers, a crown of teeth that circled an eyeless skull. It was not asleep, but it was waiting. Weiss dropped to his knees. She is beautiful, he whispered. The others followed. One began to cry. Another removed his helmet, smiling. The third simply began mumbling prayers in reverse. Only Brenner remained standing, breath shallow, sweat freezing on his skin. The thing pulsed once, and the room shivered. It wasn't a roar, not even a sound. More like a pressure wave that passed through skin and bone, an emotion inflicted upon them. Brenner dropped to one knee. Images hit him all at once. A screaming child suspended over an abyss of teeth. A monastery wall melting into tongues. Emil, eyes eaten out, whispering thank you. Berlin in flames, the Reichstag laughing with mouths on every window. He clutched his temples. God, help us. Weiss turned, eyes black and gleaming. There is no God here, Sergeant. Only Zuragal. The altar split open. Not cracked, opened like a mouth. Fleshy folds peeled back, revealing an endless shaft plunging into shadow. From within rose a sound like chanting, hundreds of voices layered into one, singing in a language not meant for human throats. Every syllable turned Brenner's stomach inside out. One of the soldiers stepped forward. His name was Brandt. He didn't speak, just smiled, and walked into the altar. There was no scream, no sound. He folded into the lightless pit, as if reality swallowed him whole. Gone. Weiss laughed, tears on his cheeks. She sits calling them home. Brenner raised his rifle and pointed it at Weiss's head. The SS officer didn't flinch. You don't set understand. We stir not meant to conquer this. We stir meant to become it. I sub not becoming anything, Brenner said. You already are, Weiss whispered. Haven't set you felt it. The black hunger, the want. It sets in you now. You brought it back when you left the monastery. You think we disturbed her. No, Brenner. She disturbed us. The altar throbbed. From above, the walls began to bleed. Slow, thick ichor, oozing down like ink from a ruptured vein. The chamber filled with the sound of breathing. Not from the thing. From the walls. From inside them. Brenner backed away. Enough, he muttered. Enough. But the soldiers weren't sit listening. One more stepped forward and disappeared into the altar, sighing like a lover climbing into bed. The third fell to his knees and gouged his own eyes out with his thumbs. Weiss held the book high. The pages were empty now, blank, as if everything it contained had been absorbed into the chamber itself. She sits almost ready, he said. Brenner turned and ran. He didn't remember how he reached the stairs. He only remembered the feeling of her following, not with feet, not with movement, but with knowing. The mountain shook behind him, slow and deep, like a beast yawning. He climbed the spiral stair on hands and knees, ears filled with whispering. Every voice said the same thing. You can never leave, not with what sips inside you. Brenner burst into the courtyard, like a man torn from a nightmare and dropped into another. The monastery was changing. Snow no longer fell. It hovered, suspended in the air like ash from a slow-burning fire. The sky was black, yet stars flickered and rearranged themselves in unfamiliar constellations, like something vast was shifting above the clouds. The pines beyond the wall bent backward, as if bowing to something approaching or escaping. The air stank of copper and jasmine. One of the guards, Jaeger, stood in the corner of the courtyard, whispering into his helmet as though it were a telephone. He turned slowly as Brenner approached, eyes pale, smile distant. "She's awake now," Jaeger said. "She's stretching. She remembers the skin." Brenner didn't ask. He put a bullet through Jaeger's skull before he could say anything else. The shot rang out unnaturally loud. The echo didn't fade. It lingered, repeating once, twice, 3 times from places it shouldn't have reached. He dropped the rifle. His hands were shaking too much to reload. The monastery groaned. No, not groaned, exhaled. The stone walls expanded and contracted subtly, as if the entire structure was breathing. The stained glass windows in the eastern wing bulged outward, veins of black ichor spidering through them. Inside, something began chanting. Not a person, not voices. The walls sang, low, guttural, and wrong. Brenner dragged himself to the cloister garden, past the frozen remains of Emil, past the twisted corpse of Ansel, now fused into the stone like the mountain had absorbed him halfway, and then stopped. He staggered toward the main bell tower. If he could just reach the top, maybe send a flare, maybe fire a round, something, anything. But halfway up the stone steps, he stopped. The floor vibrated beneath his boots, not from movement, but from presence. Then he heard her, no longer a whisper. A voice inside his mind, clear, soft, feminine, ancient. "You carried me up from the dark, little soldier. You broke my chains. You peeled back the skin. Now I will teach the world to remember what it feared to name." Brenner clutched his head and screamed. His nose began to bleed. Behind his eyes, images, flashes. A Roman centurion nailing a screaming priestess into a pit of writhing worms. A medieval monk carving spirals into his own heart. An SS archaeologist smiling as he opened the altar and was swallowed in silence. Brenner fell to his knees. He reached into his coat, fumbled for the flare pistol. He aimed it upward, through the open belfry toward the misshapen sky. Fired. The flare exploded in mid-air, a streak of red against a sky that rippled like oil on water. It didn't fade. It just hung there, trembling, like time itself had paused to watch. He staggered back down the tower. Outside, the wind had returned, but it wasn't wind. It was howling. Dozens of voices, hundreds, screaming and laughing and sobbing all at once. The trees bent sideways, snow turned black. Then the earth shook. A long, slow roll, like something massive stirring beneath. Cracks split the courtyard. Steam hissed from beneath. And then, a figure stepped out of the monastery gates. Not Weiss. Not human. It wore a man's form, thin, naked, pale, but its proportions were off, elongated, mouthless, eyeless, fingers too long, skin stitched with spirals and symbols that moved. It walked slowly into the snow, and every step made the world shudder. Brenner screamed at it, fired his last bullet. The thing didn't flinch. It raised a hand, and the monastery began to sink. The stone cracked, walls folded inward, the bell tower crumbled, and from beneath the courtyard, a mass of flesh and stone and bone and hunger surged upward, dragging the ruins into its mouth. Zuragal was rising. The mountain cracked open like a wound, and it began to bleed. Brenner ran. No plan, no direction, just away, past the skeletal pines, over the snowdrifts now soft and warm. Behind him, the wind laughed, and the sky opened an eye. Night had become meaningless. There was no sky anymore, only a shifting canopy of shadow, rippling like muscle beneath translucent skin. The stars were gone. The moon had become an eye. Brenner ran until his legs gave out, then crawled, then staggered upright again. His breath came in ragged bursts. Every tree looked the same. The forest no longer followed natural laws. He passed the same tree 3 times. Each time, it had more bones nailed to it. He finally collapsed in a gully where the snow was strangely untouched. No blood, no black rot, just cold silence. He curled against the trunk of a fallen pine, clutching his empty rifle like a crucifix. Somewhere far behind him the mountain moaned, a sound deeper than stone, a hunger unfurling its limbs. "Still running, Sergeant," came a voice. He sat up fast, heart thundering. Weiss stood at the edge of the gully, coat open, shirt soaked in sweat. He held the Book of Mountain Demons in one hand and a flare gun in the other. His eyes were wrong. No longer blue, no longer human. "You followed me," Brenner rasped. Weiss stepped forward. "You brought me, Brenner. You were always meant to be the last." Brenner aimed his rifle out of instinct. "You stir not him anymore." Weiss tilted his head. "No, I stippen more. She stits, let me see it now. The bones beneath history, the truth beneath war." What truth? That the Reich was only ever a shadow of something older. We copied the cruelty, the order, but Zuragal was first. She devours empires. She doesn't set care about politics, race, flags. She eats everything. He smiled softly. "And now she sips here again." Brenner pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. He threw the rifle, tackled Weiss. They slammed into the snow, rolling, fists cracking against bone. Brenner grabbed the flare gun. They struggled for it, elbows jamming into ribs, teeth bared. Weiss kneed him in the gut and scrambled to his feet. "You think you stir a hero?" He spat, blood in his mouth. "This isn't just a story. No one escapes this. We stir the ending." "I don't want to be part of this ending," Brenner growled. Weiss leveled the flare gun. "You already are." Then a shot. But not from Weiss. From behind them. Icist's eyes widened. A hole blossomed in his chest. He dropped to his knees, looked down, confused. Behind him, Emil stood holding a Mauser rifle, face streaked with blood and frost. Except it wasn't set really Emil anymore. His face was wrong, tilted, like something else was wearing him loosely. "I told you," Emil whispered. "She wants you hollow." Weiss tried to speak. Emil put another bullet in his throat. The SS officer fell forward into the snow, book still clutched in one twitching hand. Brenner staggered to his feet. He didn't thank Emil, didn't ask how he was alive. He simply backed away. "I tried to leave," Emil said. His voice echoed weirdly. Doubled, tripled. "But she found me. She showed me what we are, what est's coming." "What that's coming?" Brenner asked. Emil's smile cracked too wide. "You sus, carrying it." The ground trembled again, this time sharper, closer, like footsteps the size of cities. Brenner turned and ran again, this time without hope. Behind him, Emil knelt beside Weiss's corpse and whispered into the SS officer's ear, even though he was long dead. The wind carried Emil Sip's final words, "She shall wear you next." Brenner fled through the thinning forest, snow rising like smoke, trees folding away from him like curtains of bone. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to keep moving. Because now he understood. The betrayal hadn't been Weissip's ambition. The betrayal was reality itself, unraveling. And soon he wouldn't remember who he was. Only that he once had a name, before the mountain took it. The mountain was no longer just a place. It was a body. And Brenner was inside it. He didn't remember turning around. Only that one moment he was stumbling through skeletal trees, and the next he was at the monastery again, what was left of it. The structure had sunk, swallowed halfway into the earth like prey, gripped in a giant mouth. Towers lay sideways, statues were half melted into the walls. The snow no longer reached the courtyard. It avoided it, curling back like waves from poison. Above, the sky churned with organic clouds. Things moved inside them. Things that sang. Brenner stepped through the collapsed entrance, boots crunching on ash and bone. The entire monastery was warm now, breathing. The walls pulsed. The floors bled. Every step echoed with intention. He didn't know why he had returned. Not with his mind, anyway. But his body moved forward on its own, drawn like iron to a magnet, like meat to the mouth. The crypt was open. Waiting. The stairwell downward looked darker than ever, but it no longer scared him. Fear was a memory, a surface emotion. He was deeper now, deeper than names. He descended the spiral for what felt like hours. The walls changed with every step. Stone turned to bone, bone to cartilage, cartilage to something soft and whispering. Faces occasionally pressed against the surface, stretching it from within. Some screamed, some smiled. The air grew warmer, wetter, like breath. At the bottom, the chamber had changed completely. It was no longer a hall, no altar, no structure at all. He now stood inside what could only be described as a womb, pulsing and wet. The walls slick with fluid, veins glowing beneath the surface. The chamber had grown, a perfect sphere the size of a cathedral. At the center, floating above a pool of thick black ichor, hung Zuragal. She had form now, or something close to it. A vast serpentine body coiled with limbs that shifted constantly, human, insectile, avian, all at once. Her face was a flat plane of skin, spiraling with runes that burned without light. At its center, a mouth, a vertical slit that breathed in names and exhaled memory. Brenner fell to his knees, not in worship, in collapse. The presence in the room was not oppressive. It was final, like a eulogy whispered by the universe itself. Weiss was there, or what was left of him. His body knelt in the corner, fused into the floor. His face was gone, melted into a blank mask. His hands held the book, but the book now bled from between the pages. His mouth moved. No sound emerged. He was still praying. Zuragal opened her mouth. Not physically, spiritually. The chamber shivered. "You came back," she said, not with voice, but with knowledge. She placed it directly into Brenner's skull. He could not answer. He could only bleed from the eyes. "You carried me into the light." He shook. "No, I didn't want to. You broke the seal. You fed me. You remembered me." Images flashed behind his eyes. Roman soldiers carving runes with fire, medieval monks screaming as the altar breathed, Weiss holding Emil's face as it melted. "Now you will see what I am, what you are, what the world will become." Her body unfolded, 1,000 mouths opening along 1,000 limbs, singing in frequencies that tore holes in reality. The chamber lit with impossible colors, shades that never existed, patterns that bled into each other like dying thoughts. Brenner screamed, and in that moment, he remembered everything. Every war, every blood ritual, every genocide. Zuragal had been there, feeding, not as a god, not as a demon, but as hunger, the first hunger, the prime desire to consume, to become, to erase. And now, thanks to him, she was ready to be born again. Brenner collapsed, but before unconsciousness took him, he saw one final thing, a crack in the flesh of the wall. Beyond it, daylight. A path, a chance. Maybe not escape, but survival. He crawled. Brenner crawled through the crack in the flesh wall, each movement slick with viscera, his limbs coated in black ichor. Behind him, the chamber vibrated with rising song, Zuragal's birthing cry, vast and layered, shaking the stone and sky alike. He didn't look back. He couldn't set. Every time his mind brushed against her shape, something inside him twisted, like organs rearranged. His name felt foreign now. His memories flickered like dying film. He could no longer remember his mother's face, or the village he was born in. But still, he crawled. The tunnel wound upward, narrowing, pressing close. It was less passage than artery, pulsing, wet, alive. Breathing surrounded him. Every inch of it whispered, "You were chosen. You broke the seal. You are beloved. He wept as he climbed, no longer certain if it was from fear or shame. Above, the monastery began to collapse. The remaining walls folded inward as if caught in the exhale of some immense buried lung. The bell tower shuddered once, then folded like wax in fire. Statues screamed without mouths. The ground split in concentric spirals, each circle churning with limbs, too many, some too long, some fused into the earth like veins. Zuragal rose, no longer bound. She unfolded from the womb beneath the mountain like a cathedral blooming in reverse, her body an orchestra of organs, stone, skin, teeth, and sound. Wings like torn parchment snapped open, each feather etched with burning names in lost languages. She was alive and hungry. The sky broke, not metaphorically. It cracked, like a mirror struck from behind. Clouds unraveled into screaming shapes. The moon bled from its edges. Stars spiraled into the wound, devoured by a single black pupil that stared from the sky with infinite patience. Villages across the mountains woke screaming. Livestock burst into flame. Windows shattered as winds howled with no direction. Some collapsed, bleeding from the ears. Others stood perfectly still, whispering the same name. Zuragal, Zuragal, Zuragal. From his perch on the upper slope, Brenner watched the horror unfold. He'd found an exit. A ragged hole in the mountain wall opened onto a narrow ledge, half obscured by twisted roots and bloodied rock. He collapsed onto it, retching, blinking into the broken dawn. The sun was wrong. Too large, too close, or perhaps Zuragal had become larger than the sky. Below him, the monastery was gone. Only the pit remained, and from it, everything emerged. A column of shadow rose from the crater. Shapes writhed within it. Hands without bodies, mouths screaming prayers backward, children made of ash. The song returned, this time layered with laughter. Brenner pressed his hands over his ears, but the sound bloomed inside his skull like rot. He wasn't Stet alone. Weiss stood beside him, or what was left of him. He was changed, bones elongated, uniform blackened and fused to flesh, his eyes now obsidian mirrors. The book still clung to one hand, now part of his skin. "Do you see?" Weiss whispered. "This is what Berlin could never understand. Power without end, glory that devours. We are dust, Sergeant, but in her we become eternity." "You stir mad," Brenner rasped. "I am blessed." Weiss turned toward the pit and opened his arms. "Take me, Mother." Zuragal obliged. A tendril lashed from the sky, a fleshy whip covered in spirals and nails. It coiled around Weiss like a lover and pulled him into the dark. He did not scream. He laughed, and then silence. Zuragal turned, not physically. There was no body anymore, not in any human sense, but the world turned. The mountain bent slightly, trees leaned inward, snow melted away. And Brenner knew. She saw him. One thought split his mind like a hammer. You can set run. Not from guards, not from ideas, not from hunger, but you can warn. He turned, stumbled into the trees, and ran. Far behind, Zuragal began to walk, not quickly, not urgently, but eternally. Every step cracked the bones of the earth. She had been forgotten for millennia, but now she was remembered, and the world would be remade in that memory. The trees welcomed him at first. Pines wrapped in frost, roots slick with snow melt, familiar, almost like the world had reset, but it hadn't. Brenner could feel it in the bones of the forest. Something had changed. The wind no longer came from the east or from the sky. It came from within. It sighed through the trunks, warm and wet, and full of voices. Still he ran, through snow that didn't crunch, only whispered, past branches that trembled even when there was no breeze. His boots left prints for only seconds before being swallowed, as if the ground refused to remember him. He didn't stop for hours. He didn't know where he was going, only that it had to be away. Behind him, Zuragal still moved. Slow, patient. She didn't need to chase. She only needed to be remembered, and Brenner remembered her with every breath. By midday, the trees thinned. A frozen stream curved through a shallow valley. Broken fence posts lined its edge, rotted, bent, half consumed by frost. A sign hung askew from one. Colina Franta, Broken Hill. He remembered the name. They had passed it on the way in, days ago, though it now felt like years. A village couldn't be far. He followed the stream, boots numb, legs trembling. Each step felt like walking uphill through wet ash. Hunger gnawed at him, thirst clawed his throat. But he kept going, and just past a bend in the trees, smoke, thin, grey tendrils rising from a chimney, a cottage, then two, then five. A village. They saw him before he collapsed. Old faces peering from behind warped shutters, children hiding behind door frames. The priest, same one from before, stepped out silently and caught Brenner as he fell forward. He woke on a straw mattress beside a fire. Soup simmered on a stove. A blanket covered him. His hands were still shaking. "You shouldn't be alive," the priest said, kneeling beside him. Brenner stared, eyes hollow. "Neither should any of us." "Did you open it?" Brenner didn't answer. "You did," the priest said quietly. "The crypt, the monastery, Zuragol." He pronounced the name like a funeral bell. Brenner sat up slowly. "We tried to use her, to understand, but she used us." The priest nodded. "She always does." "You knew?" The old man nodded. "We kept her secret for centuries, sealed it, sang prayers over it every winter. The bells, the offerings, the old rites. She only sleeps when we remember to forget her." Brenner let out a hollow laugh. "We dug up a guard," he whispered, "and she smiled at us." Later, they let him walk through the village. The people didn't meet his eyes. Children turned away, dogs whimpered. He saw symbols carved into doorposts, spirals, jagged crosses, eyes with no pupils, protective marks, or maybe just reminders. He asked the priest, "Will you warn the world?" The old man looked at the sky. "They wouldn't listen, not until the hunger reaches them." Brenner looked west, toward Berlin, toward Europe, toward civilization. "Then I shall tell them," he said. "I shall show them what we found." The priest said nothing, only handed him a wool cloak, a flask, and a small leather-bound notebook. "Then go," he said, "before the mountain remembers you again." Brenner left the village at dusk. The sky was wrong. It looked normal, blue, pale, quiet, but he could feel it behind the clouds. A hum in the distance, like a pulse slowly syncing with his own. Each step forward felt harder, not from exhaustion, not from pain, but from memory. He knew she wasn't finished with him. He carried her now, not in body, but in memory. Her name, her image, her hunger. And just before the trail disappeared behind the pines, he heard a voice behind him, soft, familiar, Carl. He turned. Emil stood in the snow. His skin was pale. His eyes were black. Spiral scars curled across his cheeks like vines. His hands hung limp, twitching slightly, but his voice, it was still Emil's. "Where are you going?" Brenner's mouth went dry. "You're dead." Emil smiled. "No. I am part of her now, and you are too." He stepped forward. The snow didn't move around his feet. "We shall meet again, when the hunger calls, when the world remembers." And then he was gone. Not walked away. Gone. Like a breath, exhaled. Brenner turned back toward the west, and kept walking. He would carry her name as far as he could, not to worship her, but to warn the world that Zuragol had awakened, and she was already inside us. The mountain sleeps again, but it does not rest. Snow has returned to the Carpathians. It falls gently across the ruined monastery, blanketing shattered stone and sunken pathways in white silence. The spirals carved into the courtyard are hidden now, smoothed over by frost and time. The wind is still. No footprints mar the drifts. No voices break the calm. Only a quiet that feels watchful. Villagers from Collina Fronte do not go near the monastery. They tell their children stories of demons and plagues, of curses and swallowed souls. But no one speaks the name anymore. Not aloud. The bell in the church still rings once a year, only once, and never more. They tie cloths to the boundary poles. They whisper prayers in the old tongue. And when strangers come asking questions, they shake their heads, close their doors, and light candles behind the windows. It is not fear that drives them. It is remembrance, because forgetting is what feeds her. No one found the bodies. No one looked for them. Berlin sent no second expedition. The official report, labeled Weissist's mission, lost to extreme weather and terrain collapse. Total loss. Strategic insignificance. Files were stamped, shelved, and buried. The war moved on. Millions more would die. Nations would fall. Cities would burn. But the mountain would remain. Quiet. Breathing. Sometimes, shepherds passing through the lower valleys say they hear bells where no church stands. Sometimes, hunters find bone fragments in patterns too exact to be natural. Once, a child found a book in the stream. Pages rotted, text illegible, but a name carved into the leather. Weiss. It was burned that night, without discussion, and somewhere far from Romania, across oceans years later, an old man with a limp and a scar across his jaw leaves a parcel at a university archive. No return address, no fingerprints. Inside, a hand-drawn map of the monastery ruins, a small black notebook with spiral sketches and journal entries written in shaky German, a letter, unsigned, written in English. I was there. You once did believe me, but one day something will wake beneath your feet, and you'll remember this. You will remember the name, and you shall hear her whisper. Zurigel. The archivist files the contents in a restricted drawer. He never opens them again. But sometimes when he walks home late in winter, wind brushing the trees, he feels something behind him, a presence just out of reach. And when he closes his eyes at night, he hears the bells. The mountain sleeps, but it waits, and all it needs is for someone to say her name. The following was recovered from a defector's satchel smuggled across the Carpathian border in early 1946. The man was incoherent, malnourished, and physically scarred. He died 2 days after arrival, but not before leaving behind a notebook filled with spiral symbols, fragmented memories, and sketches of a monastery that no longer appears on any official Romanian topography. The contents were deemed apocryphal. The file was shelved, forgotten, until 1952, when a NATO reconnaissance aircraft observed a peculiar heat signature in the Transylvanian mountains, rising in a spiral pattern, pulsing at precise hourly intervals. The coordinates matched those of the notebook. A second team was proposed. It was voted down, unanimously. Inside the file was a name, Zurigel. No known translation. No linguistic origin. But the name appears in other declassified reports, some as far back as the Roman conquest of Dacia, pagan inscriptions, martyrdoms, accounts of the one who feeds on memory. Other files mention dreams, mass hallucinations. An entire SS detachment marked as non-recoverable after contact with a sealed crypt in 1944. Berlin never asked what happened, because Berlin already knew. Another entry, handwritten in the margins of a torn map, reads, "It doesn't end in the mountain. It ends wherever she is remembered." The last page of the recovered notebook includes a final passage. Its author is unnamed, but we know the hand that wrote it. The language is desperate, half prayer, half confession. I hear her in my sleep, not as voice, not as dream, but in the spaces between thoughts, when I try to recall who I am, where I came from, and there sits nothing but cold. She took the others, not just their lives, their meaning. The Reich thought they could use her, But power doesn't serve men like Weiss. It devours them. And if you stir reading this, you stir already infected, because now you know her name. Zuragal. There are places in this world we were never meant to find. And sometimes when we find them, it isn't set a discovery. It sets an invitation. One that cannot be refused. One that was waiting for us long before we were born. The Nazis believed they were the first to seek forbidden knowledge. But in their arrogance, they uncovered something that had only ever waited. Something that did not need worship. Only remembrance. And now, we remember. The mountain still sleeps, but its dreams seep into the soil, into bloodlines, into memory, and it only takes one whisper, one name, Zuragal. Sleep well, soldier. If you can. If you survive this tale, make sure to subscribe. Because every night, I bring you a new horror story from the shadows of war. Thank you.